messing around. This shit's getting started.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Nothing like two guys talking about something that does not affect them whatsoever. All right,
It's streaming, boys.
I'm streaming.
All right. So before we go on to this debate, I'd first like to preface the debate by informing each of the participants of the rules. For this debate, you will each be given a 5-minute opening speech, followed by a 3-minute rebuttal speech. And we will be doing something a little bit different here. For the questioning period, we will be allocating around 3 minutes to the questioning period to allow for multiple questions per period. Following a questioning period, you will have another 3-minute rebuttal speech, both of you, followed by questioning, 3-minute questioning, and then finally 5-minute end speeches. Afterwards, then the debate will be the judge of this debate, which is, I believe it is Blue, will provide the verdict on who has won the debate. After which, we will move on to interjections by anybody listening in. First, I would like to mention that each of you have 3 minutes of prep time that you can use at the beginning of any of your speeches. You will have 3 minutes of total prep time, and you will not be allocated any other prep time during the speeches. I would also like to mention that during your end speeches, no new information can be brought up. Otherwise, there will be a point deduction by your judge. Today we'll be using the resolution of abortion is immoral, with Allubye taking the affirmative and Copium taking the negation. Allubye, on your first word, we can move into the debate.
If any future employees link this to me in any way, well, you didn't. But yeah, abortion is a weird one. It's hard to suss out exactly where, like, to assign morality when you're talking about it. If you look at abortion, kind of trying to map it out, the pro-choice argument typically starts from the autonomy of a woman. And if you start there, I definitely get the irritation you might have when someone argues in seemingly refutation of that. And I understand the reality of this we live in. It's an issue I don't think that is going to be resolved until technology and science advances the way to deal with both sides' concerns without breaking the moral expectation of my bodily rights versus that's human life. From what I've read, artificial gestation could become as common as IVF pretty soon. So in my personal opinion, I do believe it is a human life at all stages of pregnancy. I say this because something that does not mean that it will never be. I see this as a bad interpretation of the ship Theseus problem. I believe that we are nitpicking the single moment the cells become a human, and we should be more categorizing it in the terms of what we are actually doing. The reason I see it as a bad interpretation is that we are affecting an action that ends the possibility of it being human in the first place. The lack of that child's existence is a direct consequence of a direct action by a willful entity. The question of does the moral issue with abortion change the reality of what needs to be done, I don't know the answer, and I don't think it's possible to agree on this issue until the time that the advancements I described earlier come to fruition. And I'm done.
Thank you, Allubye, for that speech of 1 minute and 40 seconds. Now we will be moving on to the 5-minute opening speech from I Distribute Copium. Copium, on your first word.
All right, so I think this is, at least to me, it's very simple. So, as I suppose a lot of libertarian brothers would agree with me, the individual rights that a person has supersedes anything. So, for instance, an example I'd like to give that, like, if somebody was going to die unless you gave them your kidney, right? Well, what if that person doesn't want to give away their kidney? That bodily autonomy over that kidney supersedes, in my opinion, the other person's life. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me on that. I think that abortions, at least to me, should be legal up until any trimester, with limiting restrictions, of course, on each one. So, like the first trimester, it doesn't matter the circumstance, how you got the baby, you should be able to, pop that pill. It's gone, right? Second trimester, it's a little bit more complicated. Maybe you have some medical history going on. And that's absolutely reasonable. The third trimester, though, is very difficult to explain. Because at this point, the baby is almost completely formed to the point to where it can be fully functional outside the womb. That is the cutting point, I think, where I would dictate whether or not abortion is either moral or legalized. If the baby can exist outside of the womb, it should not be aborted, unless the mother's health is at risk. And the reason I put that exception on it is because the life that's been existing for an extended period of time over the life that is currently forming, I think has more importance. You have potential life over guaranteed life. And I think there's no really debate here about. I mean, Allubye as well agreed with me about bodily autonomy. But what we consider when a baby has life, right, is really it's a philosophical question. It's not necessarily one that you can answer. This is when life begins, right? That's why we have superficial terms to describe these I guess procedures, right? So like life for me would happen after birth or after removal from the womb. That's the moment that life hits. The moment that you take that life, it is considered murder to me, right? If you are pregnant, I don't consider life at that point. Because then if you do consider life at that point, you can also make the argument to consider sperm life. And you absolutely can. It's a living thing, right? It functions like a living thing. We know it acts like a living thing. It's a multi-celled, or no, sorry, it's a single-celled organism. This thing is clearly alive. So yeah, I don't think in legality whether or not it should be legal. Me and Allubye disagree. Besides a point I heard him made a while ago, or not a while ago today, speaking about how if it was illegal, more people would do it, which I think is an awful fallacy because you can make that argument for every single crime. I think it should be legal more because the woman's rights over her body supersede the thing that is currently, and this is going to sound cruel, acting as a parasite to her body. And I think that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Copium, for that speech of 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Moving on to the 3-minute rebuttal speech. Allubye, you will go first on your first word.
Question for not starting my time. Do I have time to? How much time do I have to push before I can respond?
To prepare, you have a total of 3 minutes allocated. You can use as much of it as you require throughout the speech. Would you like to use prep time?
I'm gonna use about 30 seconds to a minute. Yeah.
Okay.
Hope everyone's having a good evening.
Okay. I agree. Abortion is a personal rights issue. Individual authority supersedes all, but I don't think that's a statement on the morality of abortion. We do make social contracts an exception to the rule. especially in the case of organs. When you die, your body can be used by the state or institutions, and not necessarily for what most people think it will be used for when they sign that on their DMV website. But when you die, your body can be used by the state or institutions. I also think that this doesn't directly affect the morality question. Again, I think we are exerting force and we're committing to an action, killing what would be human. And I use time as the metric here to judge the human life, since the trimesters seem to be an ineffective one in regards to addressing the moral question. Like you said, this is somewhat philosophical, so I guess the question would be, how do you view the metric of measuring where this is life? Because if it is independent and individual right supersedes all, where you measure life then becomes the linchpin of, does this own life also have the right of individual supremacy and individual authority? So I think that's the clarifying question we should go off in my time.
Thank you, Allubye, for that speech of 1 minute and 24 seconds. Moving on to a 3-minute rebuttal speech from Copium. On your first word, Cope.
Okay, so the issue I take with this is, you ask, like, how do we view the metric of where life begins? Well, this is a person-to-person basis, but I would also prefer to stick it to where, if we're going basis off morality, this question is basis off morality. I view the metric that essentially a baby that was just born from the womb or C-section, whatever have you, is not the same as a recently fermented egg. Charlie, who's been recently named and can play with Legos, I do not feel is the same as a random sperm that is fertilized a random egg. I don't believe life begins in conception, and I will say that most people do. Yeah, I think that's the only way I can really answer that question, is that you can consider life kind of when it's viable outside of the body. Like, let's take, for example, you have a coma patient, right? Now, you have the opportunity for that coma patient to pull the plug. It doesn't matter how old they are. If their condition is to the point where they cannot survive without being hooked up to a machine, you have the option to let that person die. I think at that point, that person is no longer alive. If it cannot kind of autonomously move, everything for it has to be done for it, I don't consider it alive, right? So that's the point I consider it life. And we do find it multiple occasions morally correct to I will say kill somebody who is I don't know what's the term for it. I'm just gonna say a vegetable. I know that's kind of cruel, but so yeah, I feel the child is no different. The child is the coma patient and the mother is the machine. If that child cannot exist without being hooked up to the mother, I feel as if the mother's rights supersede the baby's, because clearly one of them relies on the other one. It's morally justified to say that and not only that, but the life that has been going on for an extended period of time starts the one that I would barely even consider to start. And if we're speaking about the broad spectrums of abortions, 93% of abortions, as far as 2019, as far as I'm aware, that's a few years ago, but it's still pretty relevant. 93% of abortions occur within the first trimester. So that kind of falls into this area. There's only been a few third-term abortions, and it's only legal in about 7 to 8 states. I'm pretty sure 6 now. I think Alabama recently outlawed it not too long ago. But yeah, speaking for the vast majority of abortions, I don't consider.
Sorry, Copium. I'm gonna have to interrupt you because we are going over time here. I can give you 15 seconds of leeway to finish your thought.
Okay. Yeah, but for the vast majority of pregnancies at that point, I don't think it's alive necessarily.
All right. Now we will be moving on to the 3-minute questioning period.
Okay.
Alibi will get the first question, and then you guys can go back and forth from there, depending on how much time we've allocated, which will be 3 minutes. Alibi, on your first word, the questioning period will start.
Okay. I think the statistics that you brought up are fair. I've looked them up. I think they're correct, and the argument you're making is logical. And I don't think it's illogical at all. Well, the reason I think it still doesn't quite work, um, is because of this, right? So you're making the logical conclusion that you're making because you're assessing the different factors of what we're dealing with in the real world. The statistics show that the way we are dealing with abortion in terms of contraception, like it's science. It's not a question on the morality. But let's say for an experiment, we're 10 years ahead, where we do have what I was talking earlier about, which was exogenesis, where it's essentially the conditions of the womb outside the womb, right? Then at that point, that logic breaks because we're using the logic. Well, it can't survive without the mother, therefore it is not.
I'm sorry, Alibi. I'm gonna have to ask you to ask a question.
I'm getting to the question real quick. It has to be a human, or it can't be human. Well, if we're working towards a place anyway where it's more than likely that's going to be flipped on its head. So my question is, how does that logic? Do you think that logic correctly defines morality?
So, in regards to like what you were saying, like 10 years in the future, if we had this possible kind of a way that we could extract a fertilized egg and put it in this kind of basket thing that would raise it to be fully developed, I think it would be morally fine to let that baby fully develop in that basket as long as the mother and or father do not have or get to choose to have responsibilities over that child. So like the main reason that women have abortion is because they do not want to raise a child. Either they're not ready for it or they're not able to uh, provide for it, right? They're not able to provide for the child. You could always say, well, adoption is always the thing, but the problem with adoption, especially now, the adoption circuit is completely overflooded, or at least from my knowledge, completely overflooded, and also a horrible place to send a child. Like the constant stories of abuse and mismanagement of children there is completely morally overhead. So I would say yes, it is moral to keep the baby alive, or to keep the fertilized egg or fetus alive, if that condition is only met by the fact that the mother or father does not have to take responsibility of that fetus after it's developed into a child or an infant.
All right, boys. We appear to have ended the questioning period. Now I'll be moving on to the 3-minute rebuttal. So, Alibi, you have your 3-minute rebuttal speech. On your first word.
Okay. Wait, fuck, don't. I think that doesn't. I don't agree that accurately addresses the morality question, because I think that it is easily. I don't know if you've read any of this stuff, and I don't think a lot of people have, so it's not a bad thing. But exogenesis, it's very near in the future, and I think that it constitutes a very real problem with that idea of when life begins. And I think that the when facing that issue, the response of it, still being up to the parent because of orphanages, are bad, and it still has an undue response on the mothers and fathers' autonomy, their individual autonomy. I think that's an argument for fixing the adoption and network for children that don't have a home, don't have a desired home. I think that's not an argument against the morality of their abilities, because at that point, if it's no longer sufficient to use the argument of the life is gauged as a life because of it can't exist without the mother. If that no longer works and it can, then it would lead to that. That's still not, you can't use the framework of that to say that at that point you're fixing the orphanages and the social infrastructure that we have. It's at that point you haven't disproven that that is a good way, or you haven't proven that that is a good way to ascertain that it is a life, and that is why I disagree.
Is that a concession of time?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Allubye, for that speech of 1 minute and 39 seconds. Moving on to a rebuttal speech from Copium. 3 minutes. Copium, on your first word.
Okay, so I feel like first of all, this is a little ridiculous. I shouldn't have been arguing this because first of all, we're arguing on the basis of abortion, at least what I would consider now. Asking what if they in 10 years, 20 years, whatever, how many years they develop this technology is completely questionable. Whether or not it happens in 10 years, 20 years, or even tomorrow. It's irrelevant to the conversation. We're dealing with what we have now, the morality of now. We can have that moral dilemma when that happens, but I don't think it's relevant to the debate right now. Also, at that point when it's in the incubator, we're gonna call it, right? When it's in the incubator, I still don't consider it life. I still don't consider it being a human life. I still consider it being a fetus or a fertilized egg. It might be alive for all things considered, but like I said before, a sperm is alive, but we don't consider it mass genocide whenever somebody nuts, right? Like we don't consider it mass genocide. And that's for a good reason. It's because first of all, we don't really get personally attached to the sperm, and it's not autonomous outside of the body. As soon as it leaves the body and it's not, for its design purpose, it's just kind of fucked. It's dead, right? Unless taking care of whatever have you, right? There's certain exceptions and processes to where we keep the sperm alive. So I find it a little bit ridiculous that we're kind of going down to this chain of like, well, what if in 10 years, we find a way to incubate it outside of it, right? Well, what if in 100 years we find a way to instantly grow a fertilized egg into a baby, right? This is like completely ridiculous for an argument standpoint. We're talking about abortion in this current time. And I guess that's a concession of time.
Okay, thank you, Copium, for that speech of 2 minutes and 6 seconds. We will now be moving on to the 3-minute question period. Copium, you have the first question.
Oh, I have to ask questions. Oh no. Okay. So, I want to know, like, essentially, first of all, when do you consider life, and when do you think it's a good way to, when do you think it is fair for a woman to get an abortion? And I want to know what you think of uh, the kind of legal effects it would have if we were to say ban abortions, if it has anything to do with morality, the fact that they will get more dangerous coat hanger abortions and stuff like that, right? Because if you like, let's say we completely illegalize abortion, whatever, right? Would that have more moral effects to the woman's body, the fact that she can't get rid of this? Or does it not change really anything morally? It just changes things legally. I think that's it for me. I'm allowed to ask also, hold on, I'm also allowed to ask like multiple questions. I didn't just like say fuck you to that one question and then move on to another, right?
I think you're only supposed to ask really one question, but for the purposes of this debate, since it wasn't clearly defined, we can move.
Oh, I thought that was something we mentioned in the beginning. Okay, if we're sticking to one question, then yeah, when do you really when do you really consider life? Do you consider it at conception? Do you consider it in the second term, third term, first term? Like, when do you consider life?
So I'm
And what
gonna
do you think?
answer as many of them as I can. This is why. So I don't think morality is. I think it's objective. I don't think it's subjective. And I think that it should be divorced from what needs to be done to survive. And right now, I think that the question of the legality of it doesn't work. If you outlaw abortion, you'll have more abortion. You'll have one of two things. You'll either have like an epidemic of you're gonna have issues, right? You're gonna have health issues. You're gonna have just all sorts of shit start to happen. And this is why I say, like, I understand. I said in my opening argument, I understand the reality of where we are. I just think that the philosophical question that we have is divorced, and we should be moving about it with the recognition that we are doing something immoral because of the necessity of where we are, and not from it is not immoral because it's necessary. I think those are two different things. It may be necessary, and you may have to break some morals sometimes, and that's life. But you're not always. You're sometimes going to be at odds with shit. But you need. I think the recognition is important.
All right,
And
I'm sorry,
that's
guys. Our questioning period is up for this time. We're going to be moving on to the 3-minute rebuttal speeches on both sides. Allubye, you have 3 minutes, and then Copium will have 3 minutes, and then we will move on to our end speeches.
rebuttal speech, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that for me any of this moved me in terms from the argument, just because I think a lot of this is kind of sussing out where we are with each other on the issue. But and it's hard to connect the reality of it to the morality of it if you're. I don't know. I don't think it ever directly confronts the issue. I don't think it ever directly. I think I said it the clearest when I said that this is we are saying it is moral because it is necessary and because the alternative is not good. It's toxic. It's a bad societal effect, right? I don't think that that's an actual confrontation of the morality of it. I just think it's like somewhat defensive, even if it's understandable. You can accept that it's wrong and still do know what needs to be done, because it's not always what's wrong is wrong long term. And long term, we need to do what's best for society because we are figuring out solutions. We are finding new ways of doing it. We were always moving forward. So I don't think that it is even useful to categorize it as moral. I just think it's defensive. Yeah, and I'll end it there before I start going in circles.
Thank you, Allubye, for that speech of 1 minute and 36 seconds. Now moving on to the rebuttal speech from Copium. Copium, on your first word.
Okay, so there's an issue I have with like what you define as morals, right? So you're saying that it's not moral because it's necessary. Well, I think morals are a lot more complex, and if your morals are black and white, this is bad, this is good. It's a
Copium,
little bit.
sorry to interrupt, but I'm gonna have to ask you to not use the voice changer.
Oh, is it on?
Yes.
Oh shit. Okay, I didn't know.
We can restart from ground
I
zero.
understood. It was fairly understandable.
If your thing is that like this is bad, this is good, it's a little bit strange, right? So like let's take for example I'm gonna use a very, I guess, emotionally charged argument. Let's say your like family is starving, right? So you have the option to either A, let them starve, or B, steal food for them. Now, normally in a void, we would consider thievery bad. Stealing from someone is bad. Under that circumstance, stealing from someone is moral, in my opinion. You had to do it. It's not even a choice in my mind, right? Same way if you were to choose between the moral dilemma of like 1 or 5 people that you run over with the train, right? You choose one person, right? But running over people with a train regardless, or run over people in train and avoid is bad. So you have to take this a case-by-case basis. Saying it's morally wrong and just because someone has to do it or this is the only option means it's not morally wrong. It is, I think, a little bit disingenuous to what morals mean and what morals. And since that was the main point of his argument, I think I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Copium, for that speech of 1 minute and 17 seconds. We will be now moving on to the end speeches of this debate, on which you both will explain on why you feel you have won the debate. First, we will start with a 5-minute speech by Allubye. If you want to use your allocated time to write why you feel you've won this debate, you have 1 minute and 40 seconds of allocated time left.
So I think I've won the debate because I think he understands at least where I'm coming from with the idea of morality. Like let's say I'm 21 years old, I'm homeless, and I take some bread, right? I think that's morally wrong, but I think he did what was necessary, and sometimes what morally is wrong doesn't mean you did the wrong thing. And I don't think that punishment should necessarily come to you just because it was morally wrong if you did the right thing. This is why we make exceptions to. This is where the nuance of these kinds of social contracts are situated. But that does not affect the morality. It is two different spectrums, and I think understanding those lines is what allows society to be a little bit more regulated and able to confront these issues in a more honest way, I think. But yeah, that's in speech.
Okay, thank you, Allubye, for that end speech of 1 minute and 10 seconds. We will now be moving on to the final speech of this debate by Copium. Copium, if you want to use your allocated prep time to write your why you feel you've won the debate, you may, or we can start right now on your first word.
Okay, so I'm ready. I have 3 main points two. I'll go into the third if I really think it's necessary. The first one is Allubye's focusing on the fact that he wanted to talk about what technology would look like in a decade. I think it's really irrelevant to what's going on right now. If we want to debate abortion, we have to debate abortion with the technology and the current understanding of abortion we have now, right? If we were going to argue it in 10 years, we can argue what abortion like is in 10 years. But I think it's really bad to argue something that could happen instead of what's going on now, right? My second point is that, again, I don't really think morals are just cut and clear. I think it depends on case-by-case scenario. So saying something is morally wrong always, no matter what, but it's the right thing. For instance, we consider, let's take laws, for instance. We consider laws right and wrong. Whether it's by the time they were made, we consider laws right and wrong, right? We might not consider them right and wrong now, but at one point we did. And that's why laws change, because society's morals change as well. Morals adapt always, depending on the situation. The America we live in now is not the same America we lived in then, right? So the idea that morals are kind of like cut and dry, thievery is bad, killing is bad, like no matter the circumstance, is completely ridiculous. Morals are more based on, and this is like reflective in every society and every circumstance ever, morals are more based upon when they happen instead of what is happening. Or what is happening around the subject, right? So like Allubye said, if you're starving and you need to steal bread, that is considered moral, at least to me, and I would assume a lot of people, or at least the majority of people, because they have to do that thing. If you have to do something, I would consider it moral in that circumstance. Now that could, I mean, obviously people are gonna feel like it's not moral because there's like survivor's guilt and things like that. That's getting off topic. But yeah, I don't think really Alibi has a really good conception of morals to debate this, and the focusing on future technology is just a little bit redundant to the conversation. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Cope. Thank you, Cope, for that speech of 2 minutes and 45 seconds. This marks the end of the debate. As soon as the judge is done with his notes and announces the verdict of who he feels has won this debate, we will allow, participation by anyone who wants to chime in.
Hello, I'm Blue again.
Hi, Blue.
Hello. So, for the winner of this debate, to start off, I believe that it is, in this instance, Copium. The reasoning for it is due to the fact that I think Allubye could have backed up his argument a little bit more using like scientific facts when life was created. I didn't see a lot of like fact throwing during this debate. On that fact, I think that Copium argued his argument more efficiently than Allubye has in this one. That's it.
Yeah, I definitely noticed some times I slipped up in some places. So,
for daisies.
I think both did excellent though, and I love them.
thank
All
you.
right.
Blue, this doesn't mean you get my hidden stash of pasta. I hope you know that.
Give me your pasta.
Yeah.
I'll give you my hidden stash if you change the verdict.
Reduct already another 10
Bribing
points
the
from Alibi
judge.
for trying to bribe the judge. Bribing the judge.
I think we both did kind of really well. I like how you didn't really delve into like the religious side of things, Alibi, because I know that's like a argument a lot of people use with this topic.
Oh yeah.
But when we start using hypotheticals to back up our arguments, I think that's when we kind of start losing substance with what we're trying to say. I mean, they can be
Mhm.
effective in some cases, but I don't think it really worked with this one.
I gotcha.
Also, Copium, you really use your time a lot more effectively. This is something I had a problem with, was like just not not filling up my time when I was trying to debate, but you did pretty good at like trying to fill it all up.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I thought it was pretty good.
Copium, yeah, you allocated a lot more of your time than Alibi. I noticed that. But I'm disappointed that you didn't use any of your prep time, because that is a very useful tool that I think all debaters should take advantage of.
It's a useful tool, but I have like a focusing problem, so I have to focus on multiple things at once. So I'm focusing on writing down things as Alibi is saying them and like thinking of what I'm gonna say in response while he's saying it. So like prep
Which,
time
like,
isn't usually a big thing for me.
You probably shouldn't do that. You probably
I know, I
should
probably shouldn't
write-
do that. It's probably really bad.
You probably should just write down what he's saying and then use prep time to write down what you're
I
going
would
to say.
sound like my opening statement.
Yeah,
Now
it
think
was
I
like
should've
a minute and 40 seconds, Alibi.
I think the biggest point in this whole debate was like kind of like when does life start? I think that's like the whole thing that was going on with this one.
Mhm.
I just think it's hard to pinpoint. You can't. I don't think that either side really has a substantive grip on the correct morality in a relationship. I think there's weaknesses on both. I just think it's hard to call it moral. And I don't think like I've been like I think that you could also argue that a lot of this doesn't necessarily make it like you were using the argument of if I steal food that's not immoral because I have to steal food. Well, there are other options that you could take, but even not arguing that point, like I've been in situations where I've been in situations where I've had to do stuff like that before, and I still view it as immoral myself. It's not like survivor's guilt. Oh, I'm rich, so I've been in those situations and I've had to do it, and I still think it's moral. I still say fuck it. I don't feel bad about it because I did what I had to do to survive, but it wasn't moral. That was someone else's food. We have food waste, but that also doesn't make it moral, right? I think those are divorced, and so I don't know if that's still. I'm still kind of thinking it's not a direct. This is why I don't think that it's really solvable. I said that from the beginning. I don't think that it just depends on where you are. You can talk about what should actually be done, but there's a level that it has to be met in the less concrete study type of communication.
I don't know if I was arguing in a concrete study manner.
I mean, also
in fact, most of my points were like trying to figure out like most, no offense, Alibi, but a lot of your arguments weren't centered around it. Like you kept backing to like well, it's not really a moral argument. We haven't given a moral argument yet, right? And the only point that you did make was like this technology that we might have in the future in 10 years, right? Like that was like one of the issues I saw with it. That was
we're
just
already
me.
doing it. Like we're doing it, just not to humans yet. It's
Okay,
more
then
or
we
less
can.
figured out.
I mean,
So,
we can
it's
talk about it
not-
when it happens, though. Like we've been putting chickens in warm boxes for centuries.
You can say that, but I mean, again, all of this is already in the, I guess, philosophical.
I didn't
First
like the. I mean, I personally didn't like the argument or the hypothetical that, you know, like morals are subjective and morals are contextual, using the stealing argument, because no matter how way you slice it, infringing, you do not have the right to infringe upon somebody else's right, even if that means your own survival.
I think survivability trumps rights. If I have to do something to survive,
Well,
I don't really.
Rights are a moral principle regarding a society, how a society, you know, it's a moral principle regarding a society, and morality is necessary for survival. In terms of like having a code of values of good and bad is necessary for survival. So I think that survival doesn't trump morality. Morality trumps survival, because survival is requires morality.
I think we talked about this biggest when me, you and Green were talking about it. Was something about the riots. We were talking about it, but essentially that like I think you remember the hypothetical we gave you, right? Like self-defense, for instance. Is self-defense if you kill somebody moral or not? You killed somebody, but is it moral? Me and Green would say it is moral because you did what you had to do. There's no immoral or like evil actions being taken place, right? You took away someone's life, but at the threat of having your own life taken away. And I feel like this is the same with the thievery question, right? You're going to die without that food, right? It's not for certain. There's a small chance you make it out. Very, very, very small chance. The probability over possibility, right? It's possible that you could survive, but it's not probable that you'll survive. So taking that food to keep yourself alive is, in my opinion, it's moral. It can happen morally, right? It is moral to take that food, or it is moral to defend yourself in that scenario.
Well, so then here's I don't see those as equivalent. I think that's like a false analogy. In terms of like self-defense is a response to forces of violence. While stealing from somebody's food isn't a coercion from that person. That person didn't infringe upon your right because he suddenly owns food. Nor do you have the right to infringe upon his right because you want food.
think it's more of an issue of
the
me, but-
momentary satisfaction or the momentary survival gained by getting food isn't higher than the moral requirement of a long survival.
I don't know. I think this is like the one issue I had with getting into this debate is that morals are like what everybody thinks is moral or immoral is Biggest is right. It's completely dependent on the society. We grew, and I'd imagine that me and Biggest have like two different trains of thought, right? We're individual people, so what we're gonna find moral is subjective, right? So the biggest issue I have with this debate and the way that it's set up is that like we are arguing the morality of it existing, not the morality of it being legal. All right, no, sorry.
This is the kind of
Well, if
conversation.
we-
I
if-
actually think this would have been much better as like more of a discussion type of thing than a debate, really.
I mean, like, even if we were hold on, Alibi, if you don't mind. If we were arguing about like the legality of it, like, I mean, Alibi said in his opening statement that he thinks it should be legal, right? Because the bodily autonomy argument, because he does think it's valid, and that's why it should be legal. If I'm not misquoting you, at least.
No, I agree. Like I am a very much your individual rights are not, they're non-negotiable. So that argument obviously appeals to me, and I definitely agree with it.
I'm
I think
gonna disagree that morals are subjective.
Yeah,
I certainly think that abortion can be moral in certain instances, but
Certain morals, yeah.
abortion based on the whims or desires of a random person. Like if I just like I'm carrying the baby and suddenly I suddenly just desire to kill this baby. That would be immoral of me to do. Making your decisions based on desires and whims is immoral. Rather, basing it on rational decisions, such as I couldn't take care of this baby, I don't feel comfortable bringing it into a world in which it would live a shitty life. That would be a moral decision.
So, when it comes to abortions, I'm assuming you're using whim as like a quick decision, right? Well, abortions don't happen on quick decisions. This is usually a well thought out process by the mother and even father in some cases.
I wasn't referring to whim as a time, more as referring to whim as a desire.
Okay. All right. No, I guess I could see that. My only clapback to that would be like, it's a desire to not want to bring that child into a dangerous world. Right? Like it's still at the end of the day, it's a desire. Like I said, like this is why shit is a lot more complicated than just like this bad, because everything on a base root, right? If you put something in there without the void, in the complete void, nothing surrounds it. It's so easy to determine. So if I told you killing bad, everyone in here would say killing bad, right? But if I threw a bunch of fucking scenarios at it, killing bad starts to become less and less true, or more true depending on what scenarios I'm throwing out there. Like, I think Alibi said this, right, earlier of like...
Sorry, I'm back.
I think Alibi said this earlier, right? Like, how I said that, like, no one is beyond redemption, right? And I still hold that belief, but Alibi said, there are certain breaking points where somebody isn't able to be fixed. And when do you give up on that person, right? As a society, when do you give up on that person? I can't remember if the argument was like capital punishment or
I think I remember
whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was capital punishment.
Yeah.
I think
so
if you have like I don't think I agree with the idea that there are the research that's gone into it where they found that most of it like turned out not to. So I think unless you have like irretrievable evidence, that's the wrong word, but you get what I mean. Unless you have
irrefutable.
Irrefutable evidence. I don't think that it's. If you do, I do think there are people who are too far gone, and there's not much you can do with them.
I noticed Moth has been trying to say something for like the past forever, so I don't know. He keeps muting and then unmuting, so I don't know if he wants to say something.
Me?
Yeah.
Greg.
I haven't said anything.
No, I thought you wanted to say something because there were moments where like there was like a break in pause and like your thing would light up a bit, so I didn't know if you wanted to say
Oh.
something and people kept cutting you off.
I flip up
Interrupting
my
Greg.
mic to mute it, and it sometimes picks it up anyway.
Okay.
My bad.
I was just making sure. I was just making sure everyone got to say what they wanted to say.
We just wanted to call you out.
Yeah.
Ugly.
Hey, Blue, be nice, okay?
Be
And you don't
Actually,
get any pasta.
If I was to say something, I'm gonna be honest. This is probably one of the better debates that I've listened to in this server.
Don't encourage
Because I
them.
feel like most of them just like start to get completely off topic in like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
It was pretty good. Good
Is
job.
I
anyone
actually
playing-
don't think I deserve to win, but I think I had fun with it.
No, I didn't really care who won. I was just here for the fuck of it.
Look, I didn't care at all. You thought you didn't care.
Oh,
I
you didn't care?
less.
Well, I didn't care first,
I-
alright?
Worm
not
didn't
at
care
all.
so much he didn't even stream it.
Damn, my heart.
He streamed it.
Worm is
I
wait, no,
streamed
Worm was scared I was just gonna blurt out the N-word in a blind fit of rage.
Weren't
That's
we
why
all
I didn't
scared of
want it.
that?
I wanted him to let you use the voice changer.
I don't know why I can't. This is stupid.
We are professionals. We have to act like it.
We're professionals, huh? We're professionals, Blue. We're professionals. Did you look in breaking news recently? We're professionals.
No, I haven't. What's in breaking news?
Oh no. Just know this all started with Allubye, so if you want to blame somebody, blame him.
Oh, is it the bring back out the tendies?
No, it's scroll up to
What did I do?
Oh, the
This
the
is
Lego
a
fan fiction.
Oh, look! I
this is
take
a
no
great
responsibility.
conversation, boys. But
No,
I think I'm
keep
gonna end the stream
streaming it.
here. No.